my view, it is not possible for Africa to create jobs, to industrialize, to do any of these ambitious things without basic infrastructure. And that includes roads, it includes electricity, and of course, it includes digital connectivity. And of course, Africa is also at an inflection point with everything that's happening every single day in the last few months. And in fact, something that has been in process for the last 15 to 20 years, where we've seen the amount of ODA declining, and we've seen the appetite of the traditional donors declining, despite the increase in the challenges that we face, from climate to, health issues, etc. So it is very important, I think, that if we want to address permanently some of these challenges, we address the issue of the infrastructure gap on the continent. Closing this infrastructure gap will facilitate greater regional integration, which is important, especially to leverage the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and also to create jobs. It's worth repeating that jobs are created in the private sector, by the private sector, and not by development institutions. Development institutions can help to create the conditions for that. So I want to describe my strategy as really focused on these foundational issues.
If you are to lift people's life, we need to invest more in education. We need to invest more in skills development. It's not just to be educated. It's not just to have skills. It's to have opportunities, job opportunities, revenue generating opportunities. That's the ultimate goal. Our biggest challenge is that we have tens of millions of young people, men and women, coming on the job market, and they're not finding opportunities. So whatever we do, we have to make sure that our economies are generating more jobs and more activities so that people can have incomes. Jobs is about dignity. It's about taking care of your family, taking care of your children, your neighbors, and your friends. And so the bank needs to invest in creating jobs, first in the infrastructure that will make sure that our economies are more integrated, that will make sure that we are more competitive, that will make sure we have cheaper energy, that will make sure that we can transform our products, we can transform our natural resources, that we can then really be more self-reliant. So I think that is one of the biggest priorities of the bank. And we have also to make sure that we are generating a private sector friendly environment with reforms that will make sure that everybody will want to invest in Africa. Even if you're producing for the rest of the world, we want you to be based in Africa. We want an Africa that is more integrated. We are 1.4 billion people, but we are scattered. It's many countries. It's not just one economy, one rule, one regulation. The other big powers have managed to grow that fast and attract massive investment because you have economies of scale, because you have one rule, one regulation. You produce one part of the country, you go 3,000 miles, same rule, same regulation.
Africa, as you've already heard, is at an inflection point. We're at a crossroads. Despite the growth that we see in many economies, too many of our fellow Africans are being left behind. We still have communities who are crying for jobs. We still have many of our citizens who do not have access to vital services. This is unacceptable at this particular time. From my early years at the Bank of Zambia to my service at the World Bank to growing up on a farm, I have worked the length and breadth of this continent. I'm running for president of the African Development Bank because I know firsthand that many of the solutions we've talked about are hidden in plain sight. And I think the African Development Bank is uniquely placed with its on-the-ground presence, with its years of decades of experience, with its staff, with its relationships, to bring about the change that we need at pace and scale. And I think this is the time for us to seize this opportunity, because we all know that Africa needs to grow at a much faster pace and scale if we are going to make a dent on the challenges that we face. If we're going to create the opportunities and jobs for all Africans, with very clear plans for our women, for our young children who are growing up and who deserve better than what they're experiencing today. Now, the reality is, if we are going to make a difference, we have to start with investing in the African Development Bank as an institution, improving its governance, improving the diversity of its leadership team, investing in our staff, broadening the full range of our financial instruments and innovations, focusing on the effectiveness and efficiency of our processes and systems, because nobody in the private sector wants to wait 18 months for decisions to be made. Now, this will be a challenge, but we cannot accept the possibility that we delay this, because we've got far too many governments today that are struggling with debt. We've got to support our governments, make sure that they achieve debt sustainability by making sure that we treat debt for sovereigns the same way we do for individuals and companies. Debt is only one instrument. We must broaden that instrument, increase the revenue sources of our governments, reduce the risk premium that we unfairly pay across the continent.
Africa is considered to be not very competitive in these conditions, but we can change it, and we can do that, and reducing the commercial costs, reducing financial cost, the cost for connectivity and the cost for financing. And that is why we also need to strategically invest in the renewable energies so that we can have reliable and accessible energy, and investing in the infrastructure sector, in the agricultural sector. And this is something which seems to be critical for me. And why so? Because if we have a look on the question of debts, here Africa has huge deficits, creating debt issues, and which then creates more issues, and we are entering in a vicious cycle, and we have to cut this cycle, reducing importations and reducing our dependence on the importation on the food we import, because we are importing for the amount of $160 billion. And so we need not only to invest in all those sectors I've just mentioned, we need to do it fast, we need to do more, we need to optimize our projects, we need to optimize the decentralization project, which needs to be more efficient.
Africa's population represents today 17% of the world population, yet our GDP represents only 3% of the world GDP. In spite of our resources, we have almost a third of the world minerals. We have 65% of arable land not cultivated. We have water. 70% of our population has less than 25 years. So we have everything we need to be prosperous. So there is a challenge. How to transform our wealth into prosperity. So we need to work on our demography to turn it into a power to change the world. We need to use our natural resources to transform them, in spite of exporting raw materials, to process them, add value, create jobs. We need to unleash the potential of our women and our youth by supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises. And we need to give the private sector the priority to transform the continent through our own private sector, but also through FDIs. More importantly, we do have capital. Africa needs capital, and Africa has capital. So we need capital because if we look at the development finance institution today, AfDB, for instance, 10 billion approvals per year, 5 billion disbursement, this is far below what is needed by the continent. But if we look at pension fund in Africa, we have more than 2 trillion sitting there. So we need to attract these resources. We have also a scattered landscape of financial institutions, AfDB, AFC, African Bank. We need to work together. AfDB should be the catalyst of all financial resources in the continent and should lead the way for the development of the continent and its structural transformation.